Hey folks, in this episode we're going to look at the transition from civil rights to mass incarceration. By the late 1970s, the backlash against the gains of the civil rights movement were well underway. As the political climate shifted, we'll look at how and why the United States became the world leader in incarceration. Thank you for watching African Elements, Education for the Masses. Don't forget to like and subscribe and check out our Patreon page for ad-free videos and other exclusive content. In this lesson, from civil rights to mass incarceration, how did we get there? Let's jump in. In 1978, the Supreme Court heard the case of Regents of University of California versus Bakke. The case launched an assault against affirmative action and ushered in an era of personal responsibility and colorblindness. The 5-4 Supreme Court decision ruled against the use of quotas in the University of California admission system, but left open the possibility of other non-quota-based affirmative action programs. The court ruled that the state has a legitimate and substantial interest in eliminating the disabling effects of identified discrimination. The close decision, along with 6 different opinions issued by the court, including a strongly worded dissent by Justice Thurgood Marshall, left affirmative action vulnerable to continued legal attacks amidst a shifting social narrative. Throughout the 1980s, Ronald Reagan gave the notion of a colorblind society broad mass appeal through his ability to shift the narrative. Having hijacked the stories of the poor and communities of color for political gain, Democratic and Republican administrations alike peddled a story that characterized the poor as simply lazy and singularly focused on gaming the system. Coded terms such as welfare queen, crack mother, and super predator racialized poverty and turned the tide of public sentiment against public assistance for the poor and toward a more punitive approach that all but criminalized poverty. In the early 1990s, John DiIulio of the conservative think tank the Manhattan Institute coined the term super predator. The label hypercriminalized poor and urban youth of color and served as a justification for harsh and punitive policies created to deter and incapacitate them at as early age as possible. The super predator label thrives on the notion that African American and Latino youth are hopeless and thus there's no reason to invest in long-term strategies for youth habilitation and development. As such, the super predator trope paved the way for the prison industrial complex as a response to social problems that came about during the shift from the social justice narrative of the civil rights era to the personal responsibility narrative of the neoconservative era. Politicians from Reagan through Obama administration have since cashed in on the political capital of being tough on crime, giving rise to and perpetuating the prison industrial complex. Between 1980 and 2000, the nation's prison and jail population ballooned from roughly 300,000 to more than 2 million, a staggering 567% increase. But with the creation of a prison industrial complex, the impact went far beyond simply incarcerating masses of people. Natalie J. Sokoloff describes the prison industrial complex as a set of bureaucratic, economic, and political interests that encourage spending on prisons regardless of need. It's rooted in what some scholars have described as governance through crime, or more specifically, the everyday effect that citizens experience from encounters with a society obsessed with surveillance, scrutiny, and punitive penal practices. Victor Rios notes that the focus on hyper-punitive policies stems not from an increase in crime, but from the failure of traditional institutions of governance like the welfare state, labor market, and education system. As such, mass incarceration entails more than simply incarcerating the masses. It means to subject poor communities and communities of color to a complex web of corporate and political interests that redefines them, siphons off both human and monetary capital, and exacerbates additional problems of crime, abuse, and addiction. Using the political machinery of the prison industrial complex, the narrative of Black, brown, indigenous, and immigrant peoples has led to the over-policing and mass incarceration of communities of color, ostensibly as a measure to curtail crime in these communities. But research suggests that the far-reaching impacts may in fact exacerbate crime rates. As a result of stress created on families impacted by mass incarceration and the siphoning off of human and monetary resources from the community, there is a tipping point after which the number of people in prison is too high so that crime is furthered rather than prevented by incarceration. While it may seem counterintuitive, the tipping point is a result in the shift in population from the largely urban to largely rural regions in which the prisons are located. For the purpose of the U.S. Bureau of the Census, prisoners from poor urban minority communities are counted as residents of the region in which they're incarcerated, usually in rural areas far from their inner-city homes. As a result, the census data and apportionment of public funds associated with it are skewed away from communities subject to mass incarceration, siphoning off much-needed funding for education, mental health services, and other vital community services in the very communities in which they are most needed. The neoconservative agenda continued under Presidents George Bush Sr. and Bill Clinton. Riding the wave of public backlash against poor and people of color, Clinton promised to end welfare as we know it. The centerpiece of that agenda included a Welfare Reform Act known as the Personal Responsibility and Work Reconciliation Act of 1996. Notice here the emphasis on personal responsibility. The most significant piece of legislation passed during the 104th Congress, the Welfare Reform Act, abandoned a guarantee of assistance to poor families and had the effect of reframing poverty not as an economic state of being, but rather pathologized poverty as a character defect. Many assumed that the election of Barack Obama would bring the conservative era to a close. As many have pointed out, though, much of Obama's rhetoric has carried the torch of neoconservatism. When speaking to black audiences, he often pathologized youth by admonishing them to pull up their pants, while admonishing the parents for not reading to their children or for having children out of wedlock. While few would argue the value of reading to one's children, the critical piece that Obama consistently overlooked is the rampant defunding of critical resources in black and brown communities. So, what are your thoughts? Given how deeply entrenched the tough-on-crime rhetoric has become, is it possible to shift from that narrative? How might the poor and communities of color reclaim their stories? Let's talk about that in the comments below. In the meantime, thank you for watching African Elements. If you'd like to support this content, consider becoming a Patreon subscriber. You can join them for as little as $1 a month and receive ad-free content and exclusive videos available only to Patreon subscribers. At various membership tiers, you can also have access to course syllabi, PowerPoint presentations, and entire course Canvas shells. You can also support this channel by hitting the like button, subscribing, and hitting that bell icon to be notified when new content drops. I'm Professor Darius Spearman, and until next time, I'll see you in the comments.